We're now halfway through set championship season, so we thought it would be a really fun idea to look at some of the decks doing well at set championships. So in this week's meta report, we're going to look at the deck list that either took first place or second place at their set championships to hopefully give you some inspiration. Of course, as a reminder, we do have our 7 best decks to take to set championship video available for you to watch if you want to get an idea how these decks play. So with that said, let's jump right in. And as always, we're starting with the meta breakdown, and as we can see for the second meta report running, Steel Song is still top of the mountain with the most meta representation, and then it's really fighting for second and third place between Amethyst Steel, Amethyst Ruby, and Ruby Sapphire. So those do really seem to be the 4 kind of main decks of the meta game currently, and then there are a few other decks following behind. But I think the interesting thing to call out, because a lot of these deck lists are coming from set championships, the other column is actually the largest column we have here. So often decks that fall into this category have less than a 2-3% meta share, so that's why they don't represent on the main graph. But it's really interesting, a lot of people taking rogue decks, a lot of people taking maybe different archetypes that don't fall into those main archetypes, which is amazing to see. It's great that those decks are still able to show up and do well, and we're going to look at some decks that are in that other category today. And then since we're focusing more on set championships today, we're not looking at any particular tournament, but what we did think would be really interesting is not just looking at the decks that are being played, but how those decks are performing actually into top 8. So this is going to be the top 8 performance. You see the same kind of spread, so we still have the other decks representing actually the largest portion of this chart here, but Amber Steel is still number 1, so it's kind of what you'd expect. With so many people playing Amber Steel, it's converting quite well here. But what's interesting is Ruby Sapphire, the 4th most represented deck, is actually the 2nd most represented in terms of top 8 performance. So really showing the power level of that deck. A lot of this is what you would expect, but I did want to highlight Amber Emerald. So that's the 7th most represented deck just in terms of appearance across all tournaments. But when it comes to the top 8 performance, it's actually the deck with the worst performance out of those. So make of that what you will. I know it is a deck that kind of, if you don't get the perfect hand, it can kind of struggle a little bit, but it's interesting to see that in the context of the top 8, and hopefully that gives you an idea of what you might want to pick in order to try and get your hands on the hero or Hamada card. And without wasting any time, we're going to move on over to the deck list themselves, and we're starting off with Amber Steel Songs, a deck you'll probably know is quite close to my heart at this point, and this is a first place deck list from Isaac, who was able to clinch it at that tournament, got his hands on the hero Hamada playmat, and this is the version built around the Queen Shift package. This is a deck list that does go all in on the ally synergy, so we do have 4 copies of the Troubadour, and because of that, 4 copies of Miss Bianca as well. Miss Bianca, I think, is just such an incredible card, so versatile into so many different matchups. Great target to heal with Rapunzel, can deal with locations, trades with Maui, so a lot to like about Miss Bianca, but there are a lot more World's Greatest Criminal Minds floating around in the metagame, in part due to her, but also because of some of the other important cards. One thing to note here is that this player, Isaac, has chosen to run only 3 copies of Whole New World. It's often accepted that 4 copies of Whole New World is what you want to be running in this deck list, but obviously choosing to save some uninkable slots there is quite a decent amount of card draw with something like Rapunzel, so maybe you don't need the full 4 copies, sorry. Next up, we have this first place deck list from Jamie Sanchez Claros, and actually I wanted to include this one specifically because it looks a lot like the one I took to my set championship and took second place. It really stings not getting that runner-up playmat anymore. And yeah, Jamie with a very similar list, able to take first place, probably just a better player than me. And this is the version of the deck list running the Robin Hood shift line. Great if you're expecting a lot of steel matchups, because that 6 willpower is particularly difficult to deal with, especially when you compare to the Queen and her 3 willpower. Jamie choosing not to focus on the Miss Bianca line, so because of that, only 2 copies of the Troubadour still included, because he is a fantastic card to be able to play on too, and that resist one is very, very tricky, but going with the 3 copies of Ursula as well, and then 2 copies of Ariel Sonic Warrior. Ariel is such a great card into the mirror match, she's great into aggro matches, she's great into purple steel as well. Such a difficult card for a lot of decks to deal with, and a great way to control the board in addition to your songs and getting even more uses out of them. So very good list there from Jamie, congrats to him on his first place. And then we're going to look at the other version of Amber Steel that's still doing really well, that's the more aggressive version, and this is from Bennett, who took first place at their set champs. And yes, this is the more aggro version of this list. So of course we've still got our our Cinderella there to sing the songs early on, but then we've got a lot more aggressive questers with the Daisy Ducks, with the Lilos, with the Pennies, and of course the Piglets. More toward the mid game then of this deck, we've got the bodyguards there. Pluto, still a great bodyguard, perfect target to heal with Rapunzel, and also 2 copies of Chenpo, another card that's really difficult for steel decks to deal with, and especially when you put him into Rapunzel's tower, giving him that 3 extra willpower. 10 willpower on this boy is going to protect a lot of your characters and also take a lot of damage, which Rapunzel can then heal up. So 2 different flavors of Amber Steel depending on what your preference is, and both doing really well. Next up, we have the second most represented ink pairing, and that is Amethyst Steel. And we're starting off first with this more mid-range version. I did look through a lot of different first and second place lists, and it does seem the mid-range version is kind of the more popular list at the moment, doing away with Doc. And I think just in the meta game at the moment, this is probably a better pick, but of course Doc is still a really strong list. We've got the 1-drops who will replace themselves. We've got Smee as an aggressive quester on 2. This player, Lorcana Theo, opting to use 2 copies of Giant Cobra, great way to gain some law and help you cross the finish line, especially in combination with your Merlin Goats and your White Roses. Just there if you're not able to control the board, and just another way to kind of squeeze out a little bit of extra law. So great job to Lorcana Theo there. And then next up, we have this first place list from Mr. Benzedrine. A very similar looking list. The main difference here are the 4 copies of the Genie. This player opting to go down that route. I've got to say, I played Amethyst Steel at Meister Championships. I was able to win in Swiss, but then in the final they were able to get out their Genie and I didn't take him out in time, and then they just kept bouncing Pete's from that point on, getting all of the law with the Genie, because when they're questing for 2 every single turn, it really adds up. So definitely my downfall. And then this player also opting to run 1 copy of Bell, Accomplished Mystic, such a great card in this list as an extra way of removing. You're going to have damage on your Mr. Smee anyway, but you also can move damage from your other characters like an Elsa after a challenge. So great list here. And then for those of you who enjoy your Jafar Whole New World versions of the list, we have this first place winning list from Ryan Walker, and the same real concept as those other Amethyst Steel lists, but instead of closing out the game with things like your goats, you're using Jafar instead as your win condition, because you have so many ways to draw cards in a deck list like this. You're going to be getting so much lore from Jafar. 3 copies of the Lamp. This was a card really popularized by Zan Syed. It hadn't really seen much play before now, but it is a really good combo piece. It works well with the Genie, it works well with Jafar, and if you have both of them on the board, then you're able to get double duty out of it. And also the 2 copies of Hypnotic Strength. Not only is it another card that will allow you to draw cards, which will get you lore from Jafar, but a really great way to help you deal with your opponent's illusions, and a card that we've been seeing a lot of play in Amethyst list because of that. And also 1 copy of Peter Pan Shadowfinder. Pretty much every Amethyst list is running this card at the moment because it has so much synergy with all of the evasives, and particularly in a list like this, if you're able to play that and then get Jafar to rush in because of the ability, he's going to be exerted and you're going to be starting to draw cards immediately from his first turn, so you're getting value out of him right away. So definitely a really great list, and congrats to Ryan for taking the first place. Next up, we have Ruby Amethyst, and this is the first place list from Zenon, who was kind enough to send this list over to us. You might recognize that name. I believe he took top 8 at Bochum, so a very good player indeed, and using what we would expect from a more control oriented version of the Ruby Amethyst list. So not opting to run any of the Peter Pan Shadowfinder or evasive characters or Maui Sharks, instead going for something more reminiscent of previous sets. And we know this is a very good list, it's a very consistent list, and without Hiram in the metagame, definitely looking to be positioned to do a lot better. But the regular game plan we would expect from a list like this is there. You're going to want to play those 1-drops that replace themselves, use your Mims with their incredible strength for the 2 and 3 cost slot to be able to control your opponent's board until you're able to close out the game yourself just through your card advantage. Zenon running 2 copies of Lady Tremaine and 2 copies of Madame Medusa. Great versatile removal options, each of them with their own strengths and weaknesses depending on the matchup, so hopefully you're going to be able to kind of pick and choose which one you need to use depending on who you're facing. So great looking list there. For those who have been enjoying the more evasive playstyle, we have this first place list from Mikey Burns. turns, which is actually, there's so much to look at in this list and talk about that it's really exciting. So of course this game plan is really more focused around the Maui Shark as your win condition, but Mikey only running 2 copies of that because he does have other ways to accrue lore with the Honey Marin, kind of like a cheaper version of the White Rose. She is conditional, but because she is 1 ink cheaper, it means you can do more on a turn later game, which can be really important indeed. 2 copies of Bee King Undisputed, a card that I actually really like in a list with Maui Shark because A, it's going to give you the lore from him, but it's another card that can help remove your opponent's threats, especially if they're only playing 1 character per turn. 1 copy of Peter Pan Shadowfinder, again you can use that in conjunction with your Maui. But the one card that really stands out to me in this list is Magicka Does Spell. She will prevent you having to discard cards if an effect would cause you to. So if you're expecting a lot of discard decks, then she could be a really good tech card to include there. Mateus absolutely loves this card. He always wanted to make it work, so it's great to see Mikey being able to do that. And then next up we have this second place list from Missy Enchanted, a friend of the channel, Melissa. We met her at DLC Toronto. Really great player, great person. And this deck list looking a lot less like the toolbox deck we just looked at and a lot more consistent with the 4 copies of Maui Half Shark, 4 copies of Peter Pan Shadowfinder, really making that the primary win condition of this deck. 4 copies of Pegasus, a card that I really like, especially in conjunction with Peter Pan. So he is a great kind of threat to stop an opponent Diablo questing, but later on in the game can kind of be useless. But when he's paired with Peter Pan Shadowfinder, you can rush him out and immediately deal 3 damage. Another card I really like in this list is Moana. Being able to rush her out because of Peter Pan Shadowfinder, she hits like an absolute truck and can give your characters extra strength as well when she does challenge. So a lot to like about this list. Great job to Missy. I know she's from Orlando, which is one of the most competitive scenes for Disney Lorcana, so she did a really great job taking a 2nd place at this tournament. I know there were a bunch of familiar names there. And before we go into our next deck list, I do just want to give a huge shout out to the sponsors of today's video, HeavyPlay. HeavyPlay have their Equip Mag system, which allows you to connect your deck box to your dice box and your playmat, all with the power of magnets, which makes it super easy to switch between tables at your next set championship. They also have their curved sleeves with curved corners, which mean you'll never have a card upside down in your deck again. If you want to get your hands on any HeavyPlay products, you can visit them at heavyplay.com and use the discount code Inkborn10 at checkout to get 10% off your whole order. So thanks so much to HeavyPlay for sponsoring this video, and then we're going to start off with the Ruby Sapphire deck lists. Of course, Ruby Sapphire, a deck that did suffer slightly with the ban of Hiram this set, but this is the DKP version of the list, the one with the Maui Half Sharks and the Manas, which has tended to do a little bit better in the metagame, and very standard from what we would expect with a list like this. The interesting things to call out in this first place winning list from Amethyst Steel are the 3 copies of LeFou. Maybe not a card you want to necessarily play on turn 2, but a really great card to ready your Maui Half Shark. If your Maui Half Shark is able to challenge, get a Pirate's Life out of the discard, sing that when he's then ready by LeFou, or vice versa, it can be very powerful. We also see 2 copies of All Is Found, a card that DKP himself included in the list as tech for discard decks. So if you're expecting discard decks, definitely a good one to include, but otherwise you can leave that out and replace it with another card that you might enjoy in this deck list. And also 2 copies of Maleficent Monstrous Dragon in this list, a card that's kind of fallen out of the metagame, but this player choosing to include her, always great to have some inkable removal. A lot of lists were starting to run the Hades Infernal Schema, but he of course is uninkable, and he's also giving your opponent an ink. So Maleficent Dragon filling a similar slot in this deck list here for Invictus, so great job to them. But for those of you who miss the glory days of Ruby Sapphire being a more item focused type of deck, then we have this deck list that took first place from MD, which is a lot more like the item deck lists of meta games past. Because this is an item list, we do have 4 copies of Tamatoa So Shiny and the Lucky Dime, and of course if you want to use your Scrooge McDucks and the Tamatoa Happy as a Clam after you bought them in the early days of the meta, then you can use them in a list like this, both of which really supporting that strategy of playing your items. This player also including Belle, you do have 4 copies of the Vitalosphere and 4 copies of the Popsicle, so you're going to be able to get out Belle quite consistently in this deck list. And then of course you can bring those items back later with your Tamatoa. And because we are running all of these items, we also have the Sapphire Coil. It's going to work really well with your big Sisu. But the draw engine really of this deck is going to be Maurice's Workshop, doing kind of the job of Hiram. And with all of these low cost items, you're going to be able to draw cards off that quite often. So yep, great looking deck, and great job to MD for taking the first place spot. We're going to look at an ink pairing that I know is very popular. That is Amethyst Sapphire, and this first place deck list from FTL, Kiyu, a name you may recognize because I'm fairly sure we've covered deck lists from this player in the Meta Report, because they're a very well-known player over in France. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in this list, but of course it has the core game plan of an Amethyst Sapphire list, which is going to be accelerating your ink on turn 2 with the likes of T-Bow and still the Azurite Sea, and then start playing out your Amethyst characters like your Madam Mim Foxes and Snakes, your Genies, your Elses as well. Some things to look at in this list: we have 2 copies of Cogsworth Grandfather Clock. Really great into steel matchups because he does shut down a lot of removal, and it will also just help your characters survive a little bit longer in other matchups too. We see 1 copy of Ursula Sea Witch Queen, another great card, especially if you're expecting some song decks, because you know Amber Steel is the most represented deck in the metagame at the moment. She is a very good card into a matchup like that. 3 copies of Haiti as your removal, and also 1 copy of Donald Duck, a card that we really love and is such a good way to kind of surprise your opponent who thinks they might have the game won, dropping him down, moving those goalposts a little bit. So yeah, very good looking list here from this player. But if you're looking for something a little bit more different in terms of your Amethyst Sapphire deck list, we have this Amethyst Sapphire Jafar list. So if you don't really want to pair your Jafar with Steel, if you enjoy the playstyle of this ink pairing, then this could be another interesting deck for you to explore. Jafar obviously creating a secondary win condition in this deck. So same game plan early on, but of course you're really looking to get to your Jafar and then to start drawing cards with him. Because you've got Jafar in this list, because you've got Genie, you've got the Lamp. But one of the really nice things about this particular deck list is because we are running Tamatoa Happy as a Clam, you can banish your Lamp and then get it back with Tamatoa to get value out of it again, and then even play it for free if you're able to get your Tamatoa to stick around on the board. So a lot to like with this deck list, and I should say it's from Mo Shamblin, world's qualifying player, a very good player indeed. But I know a lot of people have been experimenting with this particular version of Amethyst Sapphire, and it is doing quite well, and of course did well enough here to take a set champs. And it also has the element of surprise, so you can definitely try this one out if you want to catch some people unaware at your set championship. Next up, we have this Emerald Steel list from Austin Kulbach, who took first place at their set championship. And it does include a lot of what we'd expect from Emerald Steel, but it does have some fun inclusions. But let's talk about the main things first. So we do have, of course, the Diablo package, such a monster in any Emerald deck. Really a card that your opponent just has to answer, or it will run away with the game. But of course, because it's Emerald, you do have ways to stop your opponent being able to deal with your Diablo, things like your Ursula. But also when you're discarding their cards, then it's discarding potential resources and answers to Diablo. After that, we do have the things like the Prince John to help you capitalize on the discard. You've got the Ursula to double sing, which is your kind of primary way to be able to control the board. Things like the Muses as well to help you, especially in things like a Steel Song matchup where you can bounce their cards back to their hand with the Muses. But Austin has included some really interesting things in his list. So we have 1 copy of Pluto, great into those Ruby matchups because they're not able to ping the damage on him, so he can help protect your characters for a little bit longer. 1 copy of Basil, so every time you ink, Basil will force your opponent to discard a card. Of course, you're not expecting really to be inking too much with this deck, but with 4 copies of Morph, you can shift in Basil, and of course you will still need to ink at that point, so you can force that discard and just, you know, really apply the pressure as well. And if the discard strategy is not working, or you just need to draw some cards, then Clarabelle is another great target to shift onto Morph and deliver some more value that way. So very good list here from Austin. Great job on the first place. Next in Amber Emerald, we have this first place list from IKO Kilzen, and it is a Chernodogs list, one of my favorite decks actually from this set. I played it a bunch and it's so much fun, and I'm really happy to see it still doing really well. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this is the same deck list that Joel Shadeli used to win the Ravensburg tournament, so definitely a good deck list that has been putting up some really good performances if you enjoy the aggro playstyle. And I think if you do enjoy the aggro playstyle, this is probably the most consistent and stable, I guess, aggro list, because it is able to hold its own against a lot of the steel decks because of all of those 4 willpower characters. So definitely one to pick up if you enjoy the aggro playstyle. I do remember Joel saying on Speci, I think when he was on Speci's channel, that he would probably cut the 2 copies of Piglet and go to the full 4 copies of Go-Go Tamago, and I think that is definitely the right play. If you lose board control with a deck like this, it can be quite hard to come back from, so Go-Go just helps you generate some lore toward that later game if you do lose board control, but is also an evasive character who'll help you deal with Diablos if you're facing those. But yeah, super fun deck list. I don't think there's anything in Lorcana that feels as good as doing a tramp into a Chernobog, all for free, because you've got a huge board of characters, and it's often just enough to close a game, because how many decks can really deal with all of those bodies on the board? And then next, if you prefer a different flavor of Lemon Lime, this is the Sing Together discard version of Lemon Lime. Another deck really leaning heavily on Diablo. A deck that I think is able to protect Diablo probably better than most other decks, because you have your Ursula on too, but you also have things like the Bare Necessities, which can remove even more answers to your opponent might have to your Diablo, as well as the discard package as well. So it's really attacking your opponent on all sides and just continuing to accrue advantage through your Diablo. Of course, You Have Forgotten Me is one of those cards that you never see it coming, even though you know it's coming, and really it can devastate your hand at that stage in the game. So yeah, a really fun looking list if you enjoy this playstyle. And of course, that wombo combo of Kida and Under the Sea, it feels amazing to pull it off. It feels awful to be on the opposite end of it, but yeah, great job, I should say, to Edwin Labrie for taking the first place with this deck list. For those of you who have been mourning the death of Sapphire Steel, I have great news for you, because this is a first place Sapphire Steel list from Create, aka Rip Lungs, content creator and Sapphire Steel enthusiast, so definitely check out their channel. And yet he was able to take the first place spot with this list, and very much the Sapphire Steel aggro list that we've come to expect that has been developed over the last couple of sets. But Create has actually chosen to run the Bell package in here, of course without the Photosphere, a little bit less consistent than it used to be, but still being able to develop that wide board, which is what you want to be doing with a deck like this. You can still achieve that, and even if you don't have Bell at the start of the game, Popsicle on board does represent a free character later on. After that, it's got all of the pieces really we would expect in a deck list like this. We have the 4 Cogsworth, again a nightmare for opposing steel decks to deal with. Gantu, such a great card into Ruby matchups because it's very difficult for them to remove him, and even in steel matchups you can protect him with Alice to give him ward, because of course Alice does remain a cornerstone of a deck like this. Just the ability to give that ward and that extra lore can be so powerful. Alice on 3 into Pluto on 4, such a devastating play that is really difficult for a lot of decks to overcome, especially when you're on the play with this deck list. And then 4 copies of McDuck Manor, a great follow-up to a Be Prepared, or even before a Be Prepared, to make your opponent think twice about whether they want to play that and wipe your board. And one of my favorite cards from Azerite, we have 2 copies of Baymax, another way to help you just generate some lore and surprise your opponent hopefully with it. Next up, for the Mufasa fans out there, we have this first place winning list from the Lorcana Muses, Brittany. So great job to her for not only taking first place, but doing so with something a little bit off meta. I'm always fascinated with these Amber Ruby Mufasa lists, just because there are so many different ways you can build them, so many different cards you can play, and it really comes down to something, to building something that's good for your local meta, but also for the playstyle you prefer. So some fun things to call out here. The card Soldiers are a really interesting card, so it gets strength if there's a damaged character in play, and because you're playing the likes of Mulan and Mother Gothel, then you're able to often get his strength up straight away because of that. And then of course you can bring down your Rapunzel later on to heal up your characters as well. Other things we've got in this list, another deck list that's using the split of Lady Tremaine and Madame Medusas. Great cards just to help control the board, different utilities in different matchups, and if you're able to flip them off the top with Mufasa, that can be really devastating as well. Because this is a Mufasa list, we do have the 4 copies of Stitch Carefree Surfer, another alternate way to draw cards. And again, if you're able to get him off for free with Mufasa, that's such a big play. Brittany has included a couple of really fun cards. So 1 copy of Wreck-It Ralph. When played, he'll allow you to bring a princess back from your discard. So probably you're going to be aiming there for your Rapunzel so you can get more heals to draw more cards, which is a very powerful combo. And again, Ralph, another character you really would love to get off the top with Mufasa. And then also included are 3 copies of Goofy. With so many evasive characters in the metagame at the moment, then he's definitely a good character to have in there to really help kind of keep them at bay and be a response to them, but also being a character that's difficult for your opponent to interact with as well. And if you are able to develop that whiteboard, he can challenge a character, and then all of your other characters are going to get that extra law. So really fun list there. I know there are a lot of Mufasa Roulette fans out there, and again, great job to Brittany at the Lorcana Muses for taking it home with this deck list. And then our final deck list today is this first place winning deck list, Amethyst Emerald from Zenon, a name that we've already seen once. He wasn't satisfied winning 1 set championship. He had to win 2, and he had to do it with 2 different deck lists. So great job to him for doing that. I think he said he did this on the same weekend, so he won 1 day with Ruby Amethyst and then next day won with this deck list. So great job to him. Obviously a very, very good player, as we know. And this is the more discard leaning version of this deck list. It was doing really well at the beginning of the metagame, has kind of dropped off a little bit, but still incredibly, incredibly strong. We've got a murder of Diablos in this deck list with 11 potential shift. 11? Yeah, that's right, I can count. 11 potential shift targets for your Diablo Floodborn. And again, if you're able to protect him, if you're able to make sure that turn after turn he's generating that card advantage, then it really will just run away with the game. You also have Peter Pan Shadow Finder in here, so even if you're not able to shift your Diablo, you can often rush him in thanks to Peter Pan, and then he will already start generating you cards as well. Also 4 copies of Iago, because you've got the Peter Pan Shadow Finder, really getting advantage out of Iago's incredible stats. Is just such a really great play. And then 2 copies of Cricky as well. Such a great card at helping kind of bring the game back into your favor if your opponent does have a bunch of characters on board and you can start challenging them down. So great job sending for 2 set championships and a really, really great looking list here. So that is it for our meta report for the set championship. Let me know down in the comments how you're finding set championships this time around. I feel like the meta has probably never been as open as it is right now, which is a really fascinating thing, and it's really fun to be a part of. And also let me know how you feel about the removal of that second place playmat. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe, because with the Reign of Jafar just around the corner, we're going to have so much content, gameplay guides, all of that stuff, box openings. So anything you might want is going to be coming up on the channel, so definitely stick around for that. A huge shout out once again to the sponsors of today's video, HeavyPlay. Again, if you want to grab any HeavyPlay products for your next set championship, you can visit them at heavyplay.com and use the discount code Inkborn10 at checkout for 10% off your whole order. And of course, one huge massive final shout out to our YouTube members. Thank you so much for the support. If you're interested in becoming a YouTube member or just want to find out more, you can hit the join button down below to get all of the details and see the perks like early access to some of our videos. Good luck with your set championships coming up, and until next time, happy questing.